Most technical experts are pretty good at having conversations with other technical people, but they struggle when they start working with generalists. The mentality of technical experts is very widely misunderstood by management because they can be perceived as negative, but they're extremely good at seeing the downsides of suggestions first, and they tend to articulate these.
Are you looking for free tools that accelerate your business? Try self-implementing Summit OS, the ultimate business operating system. Summit OS will help you empower your team, execute like hell, and dig a moat around your business. Go to stevebreda.com/tools and download free, simple worksheets that help you grow your business. Alternatively, get matched with a Summit OS guide and take your business straight to the top of the mountain. Good day, dear listeners. Steve Breda here with the Management Blueprint podcast. And my guest today is Alistair Gordon, who is the CEO of Expertunity, a new global enterprise dedicated to helping technical experts everywhere reach their full potential. Alistair, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for the invite.
It's great to have you and learn about this opportunity for experts, how to get them reach their full potential. So let's start with your personal why, your personal mission, and what are you doing to manifest it in your business?
So over many years, I've worked for lots and lots of organizations, Steve, in many roles as a leader and as a consultant to lots of businesses. And mostly my provenance, if you like, is leadership development, the sort of topics that your podcast covers, very relevant and very familiar to me. But along the way, sort of 10 years or so ago, we discovered this large group of people who weren't really being developed. Technical experts, most of your listeners will, I'm sure, know one or other of these sort of people, highly technical. They might be in finance, they might be in IT, whatever. And they're technically brilliant, but they're very stuck and frustrated and not really fulfilling their potential and not necessarily having a fully fulfilling, a work life because they're technically brilliant, but they're missing some of what we call these enterprise skills that really help them add value at 2x, 3x to their organizations. So having spotted the gap, we've done lots of research. We've worked with thousands and thousands of them now over the years and feel like we know them really well, Steve. And the most fulfilling part of this is that once you show a technical expert how they can be a better expert, they attack it with military precision and they really, really lean into it. And both themselves and their families and the organizations they work for get just extraordinary benefits from them really leaning in and making the difference they know they can make.
And why do you think, Alistair, there is this gap? Is it not natural to not have the gap, or is it the difference between an entrepreneur who develops a multifaceted approach to the expert who is more of in a silo and they just never got the chance to develop it? Why does that happen? Is this the corporate environment that takes care of it?
It's absolutely the right question, Steve, from my perspective, because, and the answer is, as you might expect, multifaceted, right? So if we just look at it from the organizational perspective, most large organizations, even, medium organizations that I know a lot of your listeners are, will have someone responsible for developing talent, but their definition of talent tends to be very leadership driven, leadership orientated. They even have a model called the 9-box grid, which most large organizations use to establish who is high potential talent, and they are the people who get spent lots of money on them developing their skills and what have you. And the definition of potential for most organizations is the ability to lead more people in the future. So it's people, leadership orientated and what have you. And in the 9-box grid, they have this little box at the top left of the grid. You can look it up on Google, 9-box grid, and you'll see a box called technical experts. In some models, they call the box technical stars to make the technical experts feel a bit better. But basically, they're very high performers, but they're low potential because technical experts are not seen as potential future leaders. So we work with those organizations closely to change their definition of potential and say it's the potential to add more value, they should be thinking about, in which case a lot of the technical experts move across, into this sort of investment pool. So on the one hand, it's the organizations the talent team's been given the mandate to find our next generation of leaders, and that kind of excludes a lot of technical experts who don't want to be people leaders. It's not necessarily playing to their strengths. The experts themselves feel that the way to progress is to become even more expert and deeper experts, and that actually moves them further away actually from that sort of broad knowledge of their organization that they need in order to really deploy their technical expertise to the maximum extent.
Yeah, I can relate to this. I had a good friend of mine who was in computer programming and database architecture, and he kept moving to bigger companies. And at some point, when he worked for IBM and Oracle, then he had to go and the bigger country where they would be able to pay for his expertise. And then he ended up with a very big company that went public. And that was his only way to increase his value, was to work for bigger companies who serve bigger clients and with bigger value product to be able to get the leverage. And I stayed where I was, and I went into the leadership line because I realized that we were in the periphery, and the only way to advance would be to generalize, being more of an expert. So that's very interesting, very relatable. So let's talk about a framework that you developed, which you call the expertship model. What is this model, and what is this designed to do?
Most organizations, larger organizations like your colleague, went to would have complex leadership capability frameworks. So in other words, really a roadmap for people leaders as they grew through the organization. So there'd be the capabilities you need to have and master in order to be a frontline leader. And then the next one would be, the capabilities you need to master to be a middle manager, and then a general manager, and then, God at the end, as a CEO. The interesting thing is that we discovered is there's no similar capability framework for technical experts. They might have a capability framework specifically for their expertise, like project management or coding or what have you. But in general terms, how to be the best expert inside your organization, there was no roadmap, or capability framework. So we built this one. We decided to call it expertship rather than leadership because it is its own skill set in its own right. And the framework itself has 9 capabilities. And these are the sort of capabilities that our research showed that the very best experts around the world have mastered all 9 of these capabilities. 3 of them, Steve, are what we call technical capabilities, which most experts are already very good at, but the other 6 are what we call enterprise skills. Occasionally, experts will call them soft skills. It's not a good description. I'm on a personal mission to abolish this phrase from the vernacular, because there's nothing soft about these skills, and they're quite difficult to learn, and they have very high impact, and so on. So we've built this sort of roadmap, and we use it to help organizations develop their experts, and we work with experts themselves to assess where they're already very strong in those capabilities and which capabilities are growth opportunities for them. And this helps generate a much more well-rounded technical expert, someone who's really good talking to technical people and adjacent technical teams, but is also really good interfacing with the entrepreneurial part of the business and understanding customers and business strategy and business environment. And it's when they can have a foot very comfortably in both of those worlds where suddenly technical experts really can unleash their potential.
So there are 9 skills. There are 3 technical skills and 6 expertise skills. And I think you mentioned that there are, within the expertise skills, there are value skills and there are relationship skills.
It's correct. So there's three domains of capability, if you like. Technical capability, so that's their expert knowledge. It's how they go about solutioning or finding solutions to problems, which of course technical experts spend a lot of their time doing. And also knowledge transfer is in that technical skills, how good they are explaining what's happening technically and training other people to build up their skills. And then in the relationship domain, we're talking about things like collaboration, personal impact, and stakeholder engagement. So most technical experts, just to use the example of your colleague, which is a great one, Steve, by the time that person arrived in a large organization, he would have had a very complex stakeholder map. He'd have been working on multiple projects globally. He might have had a line manager somewhere, but I bet he had 3 or 4 other, really critical stakeholders that all of whom he was having to deliver for simultaneously, probably.
Mhm.
So stakeholder engagement skills and collaboration skills and the way you influence people and communicate with people and understand what, is driving them, what motivates them, what their objectives are and KPIs are, those sorts of skills. Most technical experts are pretty good at having conversations with other technical people, but they struggle when they start working with generalists. So that's a skill set that they're partially good at generally. I'm making these generalizations from all the data that we've captured, because we assess experts against this model all the time, hundreds and hundreds of them every quarter. And so we've got a lot of data that suggests that, they're very good with some stakeholder groups and not with others. And then the final one is the value domain, which is usually the black hole, Steve. It's the business acumen, market context, the ability to understand how they can create great value, whether it's competitive value or efficiency value or organizational value, and the ability to really drive meaningful change. So in those three areas, that tends to be the biggest skill deficit for most technical experts. A CIO once said to me, Steve, that his team was very, very good at doing change to other people, but they wasn't very good when change was being done to them. And my experience is that's absolutely 100% true.
Well, the cobbler's sons are always bare feet. It's kind of normal, but yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's a very big program, because solution, expert knowledge, solution, finding solutions, knowledge transfer, being able to do that, and then collaborate and making a personal and big impact, and selling your impact, and then managing your stakeholders, and then business acumen, just one of nine. I mean, that is huge, and then understanding the market and the change. So this is an enormous lift. It's almost like being an entrepreneur, like an intrapreneur training kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of describing it, because, most technical experts are advisors to their organization. People sort of say, okay, well, how do we, take cybersecurity as an example, which is obviously, very topical at the moment. So, the organization is hiring people who are cyber experts, and those people are supposed to develop systems and what have you that protect the assets and indeed the employees of the organizations they're working for. But at the same time, as while they're doing that, head down, usually, in the weeds, Steve, because there's a lot of detail involved in doing that. But at the same time, the organization is saying, what do we need to do to do this properly? And those technical experts need to build a business case for the right sort of investment and tools and people and software and so on. And very often they know what the organization needs, but they're not necessarily particularly good at articulating that to generalists. So that building an entrepreneurial case and getting the funds and resources needed to, do that job properly, that's the bit very often they're missing. And by the way, frustrates them a lot. And yet all of those skills are, in my view, they're easier to learn than the technical skills that's their ticket to the game. But a lot of technical experts don't see the enterprise skills as important. And as leaders, we're partially responsible for that, I believe, because we tell them what a great technical job they're doing, but we don't, when we see them engage and collaborate with a stakeholder, we don't make a big fuss of that, and we should do, because that's kind of the additional skill on top that makes all the difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what about the personalities of these technical experts? Because often introverted people are the ones that gravitate toward expertship, and extroverted people, they want to communicate, they want to be out there and shake some trees and convince people, persuade people. So how do you get these experts out of their shells and motivate them to want to engage more and want to be more of a contextual person that collaborates?
It's a great question. I'd say, we've now worked with thousands and thousands of experts, and I'd say, again, just sort of thinking of the data, probably 75 to 80% are introverted, and some of those are very introverted. And I think you're right. It's not. I do think the mentality of technical experts is very widely misunderstood by management and by senior leadership. They do operate in their technical bubble. It's a safe space, Steve. It's where they're expert. When you're a technical expert, your whole shtick is what you know at the end of the day. So I think they're misunderstood because they can be perceived as negative. Most of the experts that I've met are very positive people and want to really lean in and help their organizations and do the best work they can. But they're extremely good at seeing the downsides of suggestions first, and they tend to articulate these very articulately, very early on. And, a lot of your listeners will have had the experience at some stage or another in their careers of asking an IT person, what do you think of this idea? And the IT person will tell you 19 reasons why it won't work. And then you might say to them, so you think it's a bad idea? And then they'll say, no, it's a great idea. I just wanted you to understand how difficult it is going to be for me to execute it. So the answer to your question is we ask them to articulate what their challenges are and what their aspirations are, where they believe they can add extra value. And we help them work through what's getting in the way of them being able to add that new value. The development is all about taking them to the next level of value creation at the end of the day. And once they've identified what the barriers are, some of which are management for sure, but some of which are with their deficits in their skill set, then we work through a plan and say, right, what bits are you going to attack first? They're generally very ambitious, to add that extra value. And once they see the value of developing some of them, mastering some of these additional enterprise skills, as I mentioned earlier on, they're all terribly smart, so they're very quick at being able to develop these skills. And it's to be honest with you, Steve, it's an absolute professional joy to watch, and I just get a huge kick out of it as my team do, because it's amazing when you do something and you see the impact that you're having. And this has impact, by the way, not just in their organizational settings, but so many people I've coached say it's completely changed the way they operate and communicate with their family as well. And it really enriches their home life, not just their work life.
Yeah, I can imagine. This makes them a much more multifaceted individual. One of the things that I was wondering, I mean, obviously you say that you bring these people out of their shells and, they are eager, they know how to develop expertise, and they realize that this is another level of expertise they can develop, and they do it with gusto. But one thing that you said, which struck me, which was said that you can teach experts to be good with people at will. So can you elaborate on this idea that what does it take to make people good with other people at will?
I think one of the things that we learned very early on, Steve, is that you actually can't teach a technical expert anything. You can't be that sort of teacher and stand up there with, a PowerPoint, presentation and tell them, right, here's how you should deal with people. And, here's how you should say nice things to them and what have you. They have to want to be able to learn it themselves. They have to be able to see the payoff of putting the effort into it, because most technical experts, because of the way I think we react to them as leaders sometimes, they think that just being more and more and more technical and having broader and broader technical scope, as your colleague did, is the way to go, when in fact it's adding a few additional skills that will be the case. So most of the work that we do with technical experts is in group, and we ask them a lot of really difficult questions and challenge them to come up with incredibly insightful and smart answers. And of course, you can imagine they love this challenge, right? This is their whole shtick. The trick, first and foremost, is to help them understand what they're trying to achieve with. And generally speaking, they want to have more influence. They want to have more impact. They'd like non-technical people to listen to them more and act upon their recommendations. And when you drill everything down, fundamentally, that's the difference they want to make. And so from that starting point, say, right, what's getting in the way of it? So there's a bit of self-assessment that goes on here. We have a self-assessment that any expert in the world can go to our website at expertship.com and get their own self-report for free to figure out which of these 9 capabilities they're really good at and which are growth opportunities for them. But it definitely starts with saying, if you want to have more influence and impact, and you're currently not having that, what's in the way? And I guess the one thing we do tell them is it's not all management's fault. It's 50-50 here. And, yes, management need to think differently about your expertise and listen to you more, but you need to be very good to listen to. And I experience a lot of experts, when they get the chance to be in front of the CFO or the CEO, they completely mess it up by going into too much detail. And, you see the CFO losing the will to live, Steve, with all this technical detail that the cyber expert's going on about. Engaging with this learning. It's that ability to help them probably build skills that maybe you and I have learned through our leadership journey, which is, versioning, figuring out what people actually want to know rather than what do we want to tell them, and all of those sort of basic things that, because experts have been so focused on building their technical skills, they've missed out on learning those things as they've gone along. So we're helping them catch up.
Yeah, love it. Very interesting. So, Alistair, you wrote a book. The title is Master Expert. So, why did you write this book, and what is your main message with this book?
Yeah, so I think we know we're a relatively small company, although we have lots of very big clients, ironically, around the world. And we established that there's 40 million technical experts, we think, in the world. And we think about 38 million of them need help. And we figured that we're not going to be able to do that. So the reason for writing the book was to say, well, people can't necessarily attend our courses or afford that. And so how do we get this message out to experts that this is an approach they might want to take? So the book is really a textbook, and it's structured in such a way that they can take our assessment, for example, and then figure out which chapters they really want to focus on and so on. You can imagine it goes through all 9 of those capabilities. What does being, expert look like? What does master expert look like? What's the difference? What skill sets do we need to master? And how would an expert go about mastering them? What sort of actions would they take? What sort of people would they interface with, and so on? So if we take market expert, which the market context, I should say, which is the areas that you described earlier on, I mean, the business acumen piece and what have you is absolutely critical. You and I know as entrepreneurs and business leaders, we really need to understand what we're doing and what our customers are doing and what our competitors are doing. What are those value propositions? How can we influence those value propositions so more people come to us? Those sorts of things are, generally speaking, not things that most technical experts that have been on our courses are familiar with. So in the chapters in the book around that, it's like, how do you go about acquiring that knowledge? What sort of stakeholders do you need to start interfacing with? When you meet the CFO at a drinks, meeting, you don't ask him or her, how are they? You have some very specific questions ready. Most technical experts hate networking, Steve, because of the personality traits that they tend to have, being a bit more introverted. So we work very hard with experts to say, you're not networking, you're intelligence gathering. That's the whole point. You suddenly got 4 minutes with a CFO. What questions are you going to ask that A, puts you on the map with that person, but also demonstrates that whichever technical team you're representing is interested in financial performance, capital management, whatever the case may be. So it's that ability that the book is basically a manual for how to acquire these skills if you don't have a coach or you can't go on a formal program.
Love it. Love it. So Alistair, if people would like to learn more, they want to read this book, they want to do the assessment, they want to maybe reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing to do is to go to expertship.com, and on there they'll find, first and foremost, this assessment that they can take if they want to. I mean, a lot of your listeners will be people leaders and entrepreneurs. A lot of them will probably have 1 or 2 technical experts. It struck me preparing for this interview, Steve, that the smaller businesses, it's even more fraught finding the right technical expert. And then you're likely to find a technical expert who needs this sort of development. So if you're a people leader or a manager of an expert, you can buy them this book. And half of the book is online for free at expertship.com. And there's an assessment there. They can obviously reach out to us. We have coaches who are accredited in expertship around the world. So if they need some coaching, then which very often they do in terms of interpreting the assessment, then that's easy for them to reach out to, to us and do it. But a lot of the value can just be leaning in, thinking about what's getting in the way and using these tools, which are certainly the assessment tool is completely free, Steve, for anybody to, figure out which areas have they got some skills deficits and how do they attack them.
Yeah. Okay, so this is fascinating. So if you are a technical expert and you want to upgrade your skills so that the C-suite will listen to you and will want to promote you, or if you have some technical experts on your team that you would like to have a bigger impact, or you want to have them have a bigger role so that they're more energized, motivated for your business, and you can allow you to keep them, because these people always want to advance and they might go for a bigger company if you don't look after them, then check out Master Expert, the book from Alistair Gordon, and also expertship.com. Check out the evaluation and see where you land and what are the next steps you need. So thank you, Alistair. That was a very eye-opening interview. And for those of you listening, if you found this interesting, then please follow us on YouTube and give us a review on Apple Podcast. Thanks for coming, Alistair, and thank you for listening.